Without a doubt, it is the biggest news of the day, perhaps of the year. The highly anticipated testimony of former FBI Director James Comey.
He will answer questions from the Senate Intelligence Committee under oath. This, by the way, is the first time Comey will speak publicly since he was fired.
USC Professor of Political Science Ange-Marie Hancock Alfaro joins us live this morning to help us kind of hash this out. So, Dr. Alfaro, my first question, former National Intelligence Director James Clapper said Watergate pales in comparison to this. From a historic perspective, a political science perspective, is he overstating it?
I think he is spot on. I think the stakes are just as high as they were in Watergate and just as high in the 1990s with the Clinton impeachment.
Dr. Alfaro, what do you think the initial questions will be right out of the gate?
I think the initial questions are really going to be about fact-checking that timeline that Comey actually provided in his written testimony, right? So exactly when did he meet with the president? What exactly did the president ask him to do? And then the main question that they're trying to get to is whether or not that rises to the level of obstruction of justice, which would be considered a high crime and misdemeanor qualifiable for impeachment.
Now, the Senate Intelligence Committee is known as one of the most unpartisan committees on Capitol Hill. Senator Burr, Senator Warner are co-chairing that committee. Senator Burr is the chair, actually. And yet, do you expect any political theater during this? Because we have Kamala Harris from California, who is widely considered to be a future presidential candidate.
Yes, I do expect a little bit of political theater, judging from what we saw yesterday with the prior testimony. So the national intelligence officials, the Democrats, were very upset that they didn't get the kind of facts that they wanted to get out. Not in terms of not getting any answers, you know, in terms of the facts of themselves, but not getting the answers, right? So they repeatedly said, we can't talk about that, we can't talk about that. So I think the Democrats are definitely going to want to score some political points by getting more actual information rather than just we can't talk about that out of Comey today. On the Republican side, I think the Republicans did not push the national intelligence officials from yesterday, and I think there's going to be some pressure on them to really make sure they are talking and getting everything out of former Director Comey that they can today.
And with that said, how long could the testimony go?
I don't think this will just be one day of testimony. It's entirely possible that if there is more there, former Director Comey will be repeatedly called back if it's necessary. I think we are, in other words, at the top of this rabbit hole, not at the bottom of this rabbit hole.
Okay.
You have Republicans on this committee who are not afraid to criticize the president. Marco Rubio, without a doubt, Susan Collins of Maine. Do you expect them to continue that independence, if you will?
I do expect them to continue that independence. And I think Chairman Burr, even though he is a Republican who has been less critical than Rubio or Collins, is not in his own political position, given the election that he just survived in North Carolina, to really, you know, tamp down on any of his fellow Republicans if they choose to be really critical of the president.
Dr. Alfaro, thank you so much for taking time out and joining us this morning. You've provided some valuable information. Stay with CBS 2 for continuing coverage of Comey's testimony today. We will have a special report starting at 7 a.m.